Trails and Ghost Towns. Share the adventures of our early pioneers as we explore the development of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. With your host, Mike Roberts, and historian Bill Barley.
Welcome to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Mike Roberts and Bill Barley, our storyteller and historian for all parts of British Columbia, the Pacific Northwest, wandered into Alberta occasionally, sure. Yukon and there. But today, we usually talk about gold and treasure and stuff like that, and there is maybe some gold in here, and there's some silver, yeah. But the treasure is really cultural, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is, Mike. We're talking about an Indian nation that was in its flower probably about a century ago, coming back today. And this is the northwest coast again. This is the northeastern part of Vancouver Island. And so when you look at a map, you will see this was the Kwakiuk nation. And the Kwakiuk nation was very numerous right from about the 1850s right till just about the turn of the century. 27 different villages and really quite spectacular.
Now, this obviously is that part of their culture and history which the Europeans have greatly influenced. So, yeah. From 1850 to the early 1900s.
Sure. And what we're going to do, Mike, we're going to walk back into the past from about 1870 to about 1920. So about half a century there to see exactly what was happening in sometimes remote part of the Inside Passage in Vancouver Island.
I think you'll find it fascinating the way the culture, the native culture, the Indian culture assimilated what they wanted from the Europeans, and that'll come out as Gold Trails and Ghost Towns continues. Don't go away.
Experience the Old West like it really was with the Gold Trails and Ghost Towns series. Take a captivating journey through the rivers of time and discover the many hidden gems as you travel the peaks and valleys of days gone by. This is how the West was really won, and it's all here waiting for you to discover. Each tape is just $29.95. To order, use your Visa or send a check to the Okanagan's very own CHBC or visit us online at chbc.com.
Welcome back to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Mike Roberts and Bill Barley, and today we're talking about the Kwakiuk nation, nation of Indian people on northeast Vancouver Island, and they worked also onto the mainland.
Sure they did.
There were several nations out on the coast, weren't there? The Kwakiuk being one of them.
Oh, sure. The Kwakiuk, the Nootka, the Haida, a number of other coastal Salish. Sure.
Now, what to your mind, was specific and distinct about the Kwakiuk people?
Well, the Kwakiuk people, first of all, didn't abandon their traditional practices. They stayed right with them, even when they were outlawed. For instance, the potlatch, Mike, was outlawed in, 1885 by Sir John A. Macdonald. And they continued to have the potlatch, despite some interference from authority.
Yeah. Now, I always love the fact that we know about any history that goes on in this era through the work of the photographers. We've got a couple of particular ones who helped us today.
Yeah, probably the two most famous photographers that did take a glimpse at that area at that time were Dossiter and later Newcomb. So Dossiter, 1870s, 1880s, Newcomb towards the turn of the century.
And, I mean, did these people do it just, were they on assignment for somebody else and happened to snap them, or did they?
Essentially they were, and of course it was a labor of interest as well. Most of them had a labor of interest as well.
Let's take a look at photographs as the basis of today's program, and this particular one comes from Alert Bay. And what's specific about this? What do you notice immediately?
It shows the house posts or the totems, and it shows some of what the village would have looked like, including a church in the far left-hand side, just the way down at the end. Yeah. And so this is Alert Bay, and what I consider all its glory, and probably around 1880.
And as you mentioned, 27 villages made up the nation probably in this area. Yeah. This is a little bit earlier.
Yeah, not many. That's Kimsquit, and not many photographs of Kimsquit. It's rather difficult to get. Slightly different, you see, the pattern of the housing and the house posts and so on. And everyone's out there looking at the photographer.
This was a valuable thing. Look at the size of the carvings. Were they in relief or were they painted?
Well, these were all painted, actually, most of them with house paint, which is interesting.
So the European community may have brought a lot of changes, but they also brought some things that allowed Native people to expand their art.
Sure.
This is just an amazing one to me, because here we have the traditional longhouses and everything, but look at the signs above the entranceway. One says Boston, and another says cheap. Who would have put those on there?
Well, the Indians picked up those words, which they felt was fairly important.
A Boston man was an impressive character.
Well, a Boston man was an American sailor in almost every case, you see. So a Boston man was an American. And then cheap, they'd noticed that in some signs. This is Hope Island, and I think it's a very evocative shot. And this is Dossiter, and very, very early, probably 1880s again.
And this one is wonderful, too, because it shows the proximity of the houses to the beach. I mean, look at the ladders coming up from the beach. Look at the canoes out there.
It's marvelous shot. Marvelous shot.
Spectacular.
Yeah.
Another one, again, shows the beach and the community. Look at the shingles, the shakes on the roof.
Yeah, this is Quatsino. And a different kind of an angle shot, and rather interesting, somebody looking at one of the house posts here, and the village is actually abandoned in this shot, so this would be a much later shot. Wouldn't be Dossiter, wouldn't be Newcomb.
And look, there's a European-style gable house sort of planted in the middle. Do we know whose that was, or anything about it?
No, I don't know the history of that.
Now, when you call, what do you call it, a house post?
That's a house post, yeah, that's in Quatsino, and beautiful, and you can get the grandeur of the longhouses. I mean, that's about 20 feet tall, this building, and probably 60 or 70 feet long.
And you know, the wonderful thing noted in here is that the fact the roof looks like it's decayed or wrecked, but they said, what a great place to live. Let's just take the roof off during the summer and we'll have...
And then put it back on when they needed it.
I mean, just what innovative, creative architects.
Oh yeah, it was really quite marvelous.
Another one, and the utilization again of the door posts.
Yeah, that's Salmon River Village. Hookasam, I believe, was the name of that particular village, and it was that is again typical of the Kwakiuk villages in the area.
And Fort Rupert?
Yeah, and some people call this the capital of the Kwakiuk Nation. Because
where was Fort Rupert?
Fort Rupert's at the, towards the top of Vancouver out on the east side. And an old village there. In fact, the Hudson's Bay Company came in there early, and the Kwakiuk gathered there around, actually, the Hudson's Bay Company post there. And it looks much like that today. Yeah. The totems aren't there.
The thing I also marvel at is that look at the boards that covered the walls of these great houses.
Sure.
These are split planks from floor to ceiling.
Yeah.
The capabilities.
Yeah. Marvelous craftsman. Marvelous craftsman.
And this one is almost like an art piece. Look at the
That's New Vancouver, and that's really quite fascinating. It's the chief's house there. I'm not sure which chief that is, but the chief's house would probably be one of these two. Very important. And of course the typical Kwakiuk canoe there, your seagoing canoe.
Just a remarkable thing, and there are the totems, and they've got the Thunderbirds at the top, and the canoes. The manufacture of the canoes just amazes me. The technology that was evolved for that.
They were experts. They really were experts at woodworking.
My thanks to Dossiter and Newcomb. We've got some more, as a matter of fact, and this one holds what you call a very precious thing, and that is a copper. Who is what does the copper signify?
Well, the last section was on villages, to give people an idea of where we're going. This is on potlatches and coppers. Now, copper was a sign of wealth for the chiefs in the area. The bigger the copper, the more important the chief. Sometimes as a present to another chief, they'd cut off a little corner of the copper and give it to the other chief, usually during a potlatch ceremony. And,
a distribution of wealth happens.
A distribution of wealth definitely was. The potlatch, you see, they would give away much of their wealth. It would be sometimes flour, sometimes containers, sometimes some very, very important goods, and they distributed that wealth all through the village, and villages from beyond as well. So even the very, very poor came out of the potlatch in much better shape than they went in. They was outlawed, and there were reasons for that. But this is an idea. Chief here is...
And he is carrying a copper.
Yes, and he is probably naming his son, and this is a mark of great esteem when you held a copper. There are Indian families in the Kwakiuk Nation now who still have coppers, original coppers passed down from great-great-grandparents, great-great-great-grandparents, right down to the present generation.
And that copper is being held by a man in Fort Rupert.
Yes.
Again, you call that the capital of the Kwakiuk Nation. Here we have Alert Bay, 1905.
Yeah, and a couple of interesting things here is that they're flying flags, and they're also wearing boater hats.
Now you've got a boater hat right here,
and that was turn of the century. A lot of the Kwakiuk kind of liked the boater hat, so they adopted the boater hat. They adopted what they wanted from the white society and discarded what they didn't want, and kept what they wanted as well.
And so there you have the photograph with the Kwakiuk wearing the boater hats. And what are those stacks, those bales that are in the background?
Well, those bales in the background probably are blankets, Hudson's Bay blankets, which were given out literally by the hundreds, sometimes by the thousands.
Okay. Here another, and again the flags in order. Now, what are the rings on the standing sticks?
On the sticks? Well, those are actually silver bracelets, sterling silver bracelets, almost sterling silver. They were bracelets made with crests and so on, and they were given out with great liberty during the potlatch, and they were made from a silver dollar, actually. So they beat a silver, and they became excellent silversmiths. I mean, superb artwork.
Do you want to see these right now?
Certainly.
Look at these. These are contemporary versions. These, I think, were probably made in the 70s.
Yes.
But they have the carvings using the traditional designs.
The crests. And
the crests.
Yeah.
And so when you see one of these sterling silver carved bracelets, this is cultural. They took from the Europeans the silver dollars, and mostly American silver dollars, you're telling me.
Yes, American silver dollars 90% pure silver. Canadian silver dollars were 80%.
So they were, you could beat them into nice, smooth, flat conditions and then do the carving.
Sure.
Did they have to design any kind of new equipment to carve in metal? Because they did this in gold as well.
Well, they did. I mean, some of the gold work was really quite spectacular, Mike, and very, very rare. The original carvers that carved in gold. And you have old families, the Seawood family and the Hunts, and a number of families in the area that were marvelous carvers.
This one's quite unusual in that it has the indentation and that in relief. But just beautiful stuff. So getting back to that picture, the items on those sticks are silver bracelets, which will be distributed to the people at the potlatch.
Yeah, and I've counted the number of silver bracelets on a stick. Seemed to number 10. Now, I've heard it's been 12, but I don't see anywhere more than 10.
And there they are gathered, and that is a potlatch at Alert Bay, maybe.
There's another potlatch at Alert Bay, and this one's kind of interesting because there are a whole bunch of goods out here.
There are.
Sewing machines, trunks, you name it.
Looks like an antique store.
It really does. And everyone's looking around to see what they want.
Yeah. And again, the native people, some of them are wearing European-style clothing, some are wearing the wonderful woven rain hats. And that's great.
The Kwakiuk hat.
And yet another one. These, what are all these pots here?
Yeah, that one's actually fairly late. That's about 1914. Those are containers. And this is a container potlatch, or part of it is a container potlatch, with all the silver bracelets as well over here. And this was a Kwakiuk named Bob Harris. And that's at Alert Bay again.
Well, there must be, it looks like 1,000 pots lined up.
Oh, yes,
there
would be. And there'd be hundreds and hundreds of silver bracelets he was giving away.
Now, would these be the kind of pots that they are, or is this an example?
Yeah, this is a trade kettle. We call them, well, we tend to call them pots, but this is really a kettle. Yeah. And some of those are pots, and some of these are kettles. This is a Hudson's Bay trade kettle. And some of them, they would be there as well, but very, very difficult to get now.
Well, that is, look at them lined up there. And would people be called up? Would there be a little story and then the presentation would be made? I mean, what do we know about these?
We don't know a lot about the ceremony. I don't know a lot about the ceremony. I'm not an anthropologist, but indeed it was done in a certain ritualistic manner, and they placed a great store by it. This is a guy called Charlie Knoll showing some of the bracelets that for distribution in Alert Bay again.
Now, would Charlie Knoll be the man who produced these bracelets?
I don't think so. He doesn't look important enough to me. If he were the potlatch giver, he would be covered with a button blanket, and almost certainly.
Well, that's just amazing. And look at there again, people all gathered together.
Basically a flower potlatch, it looks like to me, with all the sacks of flour at the back, plus some other items that would be given out as well.
So anytime there's a distribution of something, why not hold a party and make the distribution into an event and a recognition?
Yeah.
All right, and look at the pots. In this one, I thought I'd seen pots before.
These are basins, essentially basins, flags flying again, almost certainly Alert Bay by looking at the background. And this is a waiting distribution, so it's really quite magnificent. The ceremony attracted Indians from all over the nation, and the word spread very, very quickly.
And as you said, in 1885, they were outlawed.
They were outlawed, and they attempted to stamp it out. They were not completely successful.
They being Canadian government, the Canadian authorities.
The police at the time, and were not eminently successful. The Indians simply took to one of the inlets off the inside passage on the west side, at least actually on the east side. So not on Vancouver Island, but beyond Vancouver Island, over the strait, right? Yeah. And so they were very successful in carrying on their traditional rituals.
Okay, going to take a break here, but be back because there's more to talk about, all the masks and the cultural regalia and everything. We're going to talk about that right after this break. Don't go away.
A message from the Government of Canada.
Welcome back to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Mike Roberts and Bill Barley talking about the Kwakiuk Nation, the art and the culture and the just remarkable artisanship. They are just amazing.
Yeah.
We know a great deal about the early masks and things as a result of collections, but who has most of the collections?
Most of the collection is the American Museum of Natural History, unfortunately, collected by George Hunt of the famous Hunt family around just before and just after the turn of the century.
This is George. This is George Hunt, and he lived in what, Fort Rupert?
He lived in Fort Rupert.
And was he a carver at all himself?
Yes, he was indeed.
And so he made the collections for Boas of the American Museum, and that's where they are today.
American Museum of Natural History, right?
All right. Take a look at some of these masks, and you think that they're just intricate in themselves. This looks like all there is.
An ordinary mask.
But you can see just down at the bottom, there's a little bit of string and stuff.
That's right.
And this is called what kind of a mask?
That's a transformation mask, and it opens up into this. So there's two different worlds. One is portrayed, pull the strings, another world comes into view.
The way it locks together, the way it shows off.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Just remarkable. There's another transformation mask here too. But what's this one first
That's
of all?
That's a wasp mask.
A wasp?
And that's very, very interesting. And you can see it, it's a copper and beautifully done. Absolutely stunning work.
So there'd be a cloth in there, there'd be wood, there'd be copper, and there it is, the mouth and the eye and everything. That's so distinguishing. Who's the guy with the big nose?
Well, it's kind of a trickster. There's an Indian name for him, and he was represented pre-natural human being, actually, and Tamatal. And my pronunciation is probably incorrect, but he was more than a joker.
Look at they've got additional pieces of wood over for the eyebrows, and wonderful piece of work.
Marvelous work, marvelous work. And there's a slave killer. With a bone killer.
So this is a weapon, actually?
Yes, but that would probably be used in rituals. It would be used in a dance, and would not be used as it's quoted.
So the handle is down at the bottom,
right.
and the blade is that piece that's through the statue.
And there's one of the many dishes, and beautifully done. This is a wolf dish, and beautifully carved. This would be turn of the century, 1890s, also collected by Hunt.
And would these be, kind of artwork that they'd put on their mantle, or would this be used day to day?
This would be used in all your ceremonies and your feasts and everything else, and during the potlatch.
This is one of those wonderful faces.
This is Denizen of the Forest, an original mask again, probably 1898, 1899, 1900.
Human hair along the top?
Yes.
And there's one other transformation mask, I alluded to it. There is the outside. It kind of looks like the god of wind or something.
That's true. It's really quite remarkable.
And bark, but then again you pull on the string.
And then you have an entirely different being coming into view again with the whites and the reds and so on. It's really quite remarkable.
And the inside of either side of the face that's pulled back is now the hands and
that's right. Oh yeah, it's just stunning, absolutely stunning stuff.
Okay. More photographs. Here we have a man wearing regalia and a cloak.
Yeah. Indian chief, Kwakiuk chief on board the Boxer, and underneath him he has his button blanket, but he also has European clothes. And he's taking, that picture is probably taken in the early 1880s.
And why would he be aboard the SS Boxer?
Oh, he was curious, probably trading.
And there was one of our historic photographers capturing the moment. There. Wonderful.
And that's a house post in almost certainly in Fort Rupert, and shows the magnificence of the house post.
Now this house post is on the inside.
That's
so
right.
In addition to having a house post on the outside welcoming people, there's a house post on the inside.
True,
now this is a huge common room in here?
Yeah, it's one of the, it's a great hall.
Look at this remarkable weaving. Is this weaving?
Yeah. Yes, well, actually, the button blanket's here, so that would be Hudson's Bay Lease, a trade blanket with buttons over it. That's a chilkat blanket on the left-hand side. The button blanket on the right-hand side displaying whales, quite obviously. And important personages wore those.
Yeah.
And this is kind of interesting, actually, Mike. This one here. This one is house posts in front of the chief's house in Alert Bay.
And Now, there's something looks a little more modern about that. This may have been a more modern era, or do you...
No, actually, that's about 1880s.
What, I mean, what detail and what...
It's marvelous stuff.
Yeah.
Just beautiful. And that's interesting. That's Guilford Island. And Chief Scow's house, that's on the right-hand side here. So that's the most magnificent house. That's the mansion of Guilford Island. And this is a marvelous photograph, probably a Dossiter, I think, and shows the Indian village at the time.
And look, there are the canoes on the beach, but then it looks like a European boat just sort of anchored offshore there.
Yeah. And the next one is a graveyard, actually, in Alert Bay. And that just shows typical graveyard of the time. That's around the turn of the century. And this one is kind of interesting. That's the Indians celebrating the coronation of King George VI. And that's 1936. And so they were extremely patriotic. A lot of button blankets in the display. And then you have finally, which I think is kind of nice, a speaker getting up, probably after a potlatch or before a potlatch, at Fort Rupert, judging from the background. And he has his button blanket, and they're examining the camera and partially listening to him as well. Sometimes the speeches would go on for several hours.
These, again, I marvel at the fact that a culture that could have been inundated by a European culture said, and had the wisdom to say, there are lots of that we can take from this.
Right. We will take this much and no more, which I found very interesting.
Yeah. And the buttons, for example, incorporated into that.
The beads.
Now, at what stage are we, I guess, at reclaiming this culture? What stage are the Kwakiuk people today at reclaiming?
Well, certainly, you know, they've rebuilt one of the big halls in Fort Rupert and other parts. They're getting some of their original material back, and I think there's a second flowering of that nation. And when I say nation, I say that with some consideration, because they were indeed a nation apart. And you know, you can just from the artifacts of the past, they were very gifted. I think as artists, the Northwest Coast people, that would include the Kwakiuk, it'll include the Haida, the Nootka, the Coastal Salish, were very, very unique.
27 villages approximately made up the Kwakiuk Nation. And do we have any idea of what the population would have been? Would that have been 10,000 or 20,000 souls? How many people would that have been?
No, I don't think it would number 20,000. And the figures vary widely, Mike. They run from the low several thousand up to a height. Remember that the Indian nations were susceptible to diseases that didn't affect us.
Well, I mean, once the Europeans arrived, they decimated the population.
Measles, diphtheria, scarlet fever, and so on. And so that there was down to several hundreds at one time, and have increased significantly since that time.
And the book, really, that we get most of the photographs out of for today's show is this one. Tell me about this book.
Well, I think it's superbly edited. It's well researched, Mike, and the photographs are really quite marvelous.
Chiefly Feasts, the Enduring Kwakiuk Potlatch. And who is the author?
Well, actually, Aldona Joanitis, and published by Douglas and McIntyre in Old British Columbia.
And just wonderful photographs throughout it, and a great story. This is your personal copy. You figure this is a reference book that you will keep by your side for years to come.
I will indeed. I'll keep that till the end of my days.
Well, it's been a fascinating story today, and getting a chance to see the photographs and sensing the interaction of the European and the Kwakiuk cultures. Great story. Who knows where we're going to be next time, but join us on Gold Trails and Ghost Towns next time as we take a look at the history of British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest. We'll see you next time.